Doing questions toward the end of the presentation, and we encourage you to type your questions into the chat during the lecture so that we can have Dr. Baldwin answer them once he's finished giving the lecture. And then we are recording this presentation, so we will send out the recording as well once the presentation is over. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Baldwin.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my lecture entitled The Texas Revolution and Erastus Deaf Smith. Before I begin, please allow me to describe the set behind me and my costume and the visual information for our deaf, blind, and or blind people across America who are viewing this and would like to have a visual description of what's on the screen. Keep in mind that the Dallas Library and myself have every intent of making this program accessible for everyone. So below us, we have captions, and off camera, we have interpreters. I'm using sign language, and this is our opportunity to teach our hearing viewers and describe our images. Please don't forget that also, just as we enter the month of November, it's Disability Employment Awareness Month. And as we finish our program, you can ask me questions, so hold your programs to the end. Whew. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Steve Baldwin. And my description is that I'm a white gentleman with a lot of white hair, and I'm trying to grow a beard that my wife doesn't like. This is one of my first Halloween costumes since I was a little kid, and what it looks like is a tan buckskin leather shirt. Behind me, I have a nice, comfy, knitted blanket. That blanket is hanging and shows a picture of the state of Texas, a map, if you will, with different cities, including Fort Worth, Dallas, Austin, and San Antonio. My favorite poster happens to also be hanging behind me, which is a picture of Deaf Smiths, and it was a wax figurine that was finished in 2009 by Don Aber. He was a deaf sculptor. And then obviously we have a spider on my blanket. This is Halloween, and I wanted to celebrate the theme of Halloween. And then we'll share with you some Deaf Smith ghost stories and some myths associated with cemeteries. So in my holster, I have a gun, and I've taken that off and I feel light now. Also with me, I have a carved, beautiful wooden knife from the same tree that Deaf Smith climbed back in 1835. My friend, Matt Adams, the sculptor, sculpted this wooden knife. It's beautiful artwork. It's not easy for me to describe through a quick summary the life of Deaf Smith. But I will start, in my professional opinion, with the most important pieces of the history, which was his military feat as a private in the military. He was a spy. He was a scout for the Texian army. And you'll notice that's spelled Texian. Back then, that word meant people from 1836 to the time of 1845, before it became, or the Texas Territory became part of the US. And his military feats were many. And I'm going to pick two of those feats today, because I felt that if it were not for these feats, we would not have thought that the Texians would have won the Battle of San Jacinto near Houston. So these two feats are key battles that led to winning the war in 18 minutes during one of the largest battles. The first feat that's so important was that Deaf Smith was with a group of scouts riding his horse, passing Buffalo Bayou, and crossing the bayou. He noticed a courier riding on a horse, delivering important information to enemy officers. There were 4 different officers that they were notifying about, I have 1,500, I have 1,800. And Deaf Smith noticed that courier and captured the courier, brought that courier to General Sam Houston, opened up the pouch and found the maps, the secret information that told him where the army was, the opposing army was. And the 4th Army was under General Santa Anna, very close by, which was great. They had 1,500 soldiers here, 1,800 soldiers there, and General Sam Houston decided that this was the time to act. But the second feat that Deaf Smith did was to tell Sam Houston he felt it was better that we destroy the Vines Bridge and destroy that bridge so that the 4,000 soldiers could not cross the bridge. Deaf Smith asked Sam Houston what he thought, and General Houston said yes. So they led 75 people, led by Deaf Smith, and they destroyed that bridge. That was an important point in destroying that bridge. And then Deaf Smith announced that we were victorious and we will fight you to the death. You will not be able to escape. Between those 2 important feats, Houston then decided to have a surprise attack. And while the enemy was sleeping, having their siesta, 800 brave Texian soldiers destroyed and captured the enemy. They captured Chief Santa Anna, and they brought Chief Santa Anna to General Sam Houston and said to Sam Houston, we had won the war within just 15 minutes. And what do you think of our victory in San Jacinto, and how these 2 important military achievements helped us to win the war? Since I've been studying Deaf Smith for the last 40 years, since 1980, I've noticed that General Sam Houston, how he became the president of the Republic of Texas. He was a biographer, and he listed that he made decisions to destroy the Vines Bridge himself. And Deaf Smith said nothing. But his military friends objected in saying that General Sam Houston was wrong in claiming credit for that decision. And reading all of the soldiers' information that they scribed, they decided that it was Deaf Smith who made the recommendation. And we found out the truth. And the name of that book by Houston was called The Ravine or Revenge. And you know that in Texas, we love to talk about the Alamo, but sometimes we forget other battles that are more important. We do preserve memories. We do have documents about Deaf Smith, but it's sad to say that he never really wrote any papers himself other than his own will. He said, you know, you owe me this or I owe you that. Those were the types of documents that he wrote, but he never wrote about his own successes, his own feats. He was very humble, and other people bragged about him, but he did not brag about himself. So there was a sculpture, a statue, and a painting that then helped establish his name in Texas. People did not forget Deaf Smith. If you go to the Capitol here in the state of Texas, in Austin, Texas, you will find 2 or 3 paintings when you go into the foyer. The south-facing foyer in the state capitol, a very large painting exists there where we had the surrender of Santa Anna. It's a beautiful picture back in 1889 with Suttle. His wife later worked for the Texas School for the Deaf. Because they owed him for the painting, and they gave Mrs. Huddle a job for teaching at the Texas School for the Deaf, which is why so many people learned about Deaf Smith in the early 1900s, thanks to that painter and that artist. I'll show you part of the painting now. You can see that Deaf Smith is cupping his ear to listen to sound, and Sam Houston is sitting at the same level at the picture as Deaf Smith is. They're both at the same level. And how did that painting depict Deaf Smith as being a hero? He was interviewing all of the military people, all of the soldiers who fought in the Battle of 1836, that April. He interviewed all of those people. Some of them were 70 years old, some of them were 80 years old. All of the people he interviewed said Deaf Smith was the key soldier. He was the hero. And that's why the painter gave Deaf Smith such a prominent position in the painting. So when you go to the state capitol, look for this huge painting. And I just heads up, the people are small in the painting, so you're going to have to look closely. His friends endorsed him, documented his history, And I have a true life picture of him here that was painted of Deaf Smith. This is the only painting that focused only on Deaf Smith. But guess who paid for this painting? President and former General Sam Houston. My personal theory was that General Sam Houston was guilty after saying that he took credit for destroying the bridge. So he decided to have this painting done of Deaf Smith in 1837, in the spring of 1837. It's a perfect picture of Deaf Smith. Later, we found other paintings that were similar that copied this original painting. Those copies were used on currency, where Deaf Smith's picture shows up on the $5 bill. The Republic of Texas had its own currency, and this $5 bill is a copy of his portrait that was commissioned by General Sam Houston. There are other pictures of Deaf Smith and Stephen Austin, the father of Texas. They had a privileged honor of having their pictures placed on the Republic of Texas currency. And that was great that we kept his notoriety intact through that currency. It's a bit sad that the honors weren't quite enough. In the 1890s, they named a county in Texas after Deaf Smith. A friend of mine went to the Panhandle of Texas and took this picture, which shows a road sign with the name Deaf Smith County, Deaf Smith County line. It's so far away in the top part of the state. El Paso's out west, Dallas is closer to the eastern part, and Deaf Smith County is in the northern part of the state. I have a friend by the name of Larry Evans, is that he would always tell me, why was that Deaf Smith County so far away? And the revolution in Texas took place in central Texas. It's not that significant that it was so far away, but what was important was that his name be memorialized. And what we show now is a hero through this artwork. And through my studies, I learned that the Hull brothers, Dr. Chris Hull from Fort Worth and his brother, both happened to be the fourth great grandsons of Deaf Smith. I met them 3 years ago.
And then, so, and I learned something through this report, and I learned that through a video that I watched that compared to the three of us, that Deaf Smith, like we knew that Deaf Smith had a service dog, a hearing service dog. There's transcriptions of it saying that he had a service dog. And he said that his dog was known for biting people in the butt. So there was a picture of the dog. And I'm going to show you what this dog looked like. We found a picture, and so I would like to show it to you.
Oh,
And here you can see a dog in the background standing behind Deaf Smith.
oh, bring it back up, dude.
And then here's another painting where we can see a dog sitting behind a group of men or in a circle with a group of men. The artist's name was Rainey. I learned that this artist, hold on, let me put this down, was a soldier with Deaf Smith. They both fought together during the Battle of San Jacinto. So both of them got captured General Santa Anna and brought him back. And Rainey, the artist, wanted to paint Deaf Smith. And if you notice, the face is exactly like the painting that I showed you before. So I'm showing the painting again, and you can see Deaf Smith standing in front of a covered wagon. That's amazing how art helps us to know the history of the deaf world through artists' work, through their work. I think that it is important to document through art the occurrences that have happened. One thing that the Hull brothers told me was that if it weren't for Deaf Smith's dog during the Battle of San Jacinto, the dog was an important part of San Jacinto as well. If you go to the state capitol and you can look for the war dog and find him in paintings. Now, time goes by fast. It's already 2:23. I would like to share with you part of some of the myths surrounding Deaf Smith that, people sometimes will sign myth as the sign lie, but I don't like that because that's not, the connotation is wrong. If you look at Greek mythology, etc., it's more imagination based. And so I prefer to see it spelled out as myths. And so you have myths compared to facts. So I'm going to share 5 myths related to his personal life, his war history, as well as his speech reading capabilities. Over the years, people have asked me many times if it was true that Deaf Smith was a quote unquote fake deaf. Was he actually a hearing person? And my answer to them has not changed since the 1980s. I have studied, I have looked at writing, I have looked at the words he uses, and people describe his speech and his behavior, as well as his attitude. He seemed to be a very studious man. And if you look at the way that he writes things, as he wrote things, the way that he spells things is very similar to how my hard of hearing brothers spell. So yes, he had a hearing loss. My brother is a professional audiologist, and he does have to write some. And when he was looking at the information that Deaf Smith used, there's no question that he wasn't hard of hearing because of the way that he wrote English. Another question that came up, somebody asked me last week, did Deaf Smith own any slaves? And did he kill Indians? I had never been asked this question before. That was the first time in 40 years. So I am happy to provide the answer. First of all, he did not own any slaves. I have researched and I found that yes, his grandfather who was on the boat to Connecticut from England, did own slaves, but Deaf Smith did not. As for the idea of killing Indians, there is no evidence that Deaf Smith did kill any Indians. And it was because the Indians respected him. They had a mutual respect. Can you imagine? The third myth is the concept that it was, people are wondering if President Houston fired Deaf Smith. And the answer is no, he did not. President Houston did not fire Deaf Smith. He did not order him to make military decisions, or he was not sent to Laredo or any of that sort. Deaf Smith won small battles, and they took 20 horses and took them to San Antonio. They gave him 20 horses, which is worth a lot at that time. But Deaf Smith did leave the military because of being depressed, and he went back to be with his family. So another question that comes up all the time is, did Deaf Smith fight at the Alamo? I get this question all the time. I've gotten it for 40 years. Oh, come on. The answer is no. He wanted to go to the Alamo, but General Austin said no and forced him to stay with the Mexicans. And he said, we need you where you are. We need your eyes. The Texas military needs you to stay. Do not go to the Alamo. One of the interesting parts that I have read is that 200 people died at the Alamo. Deaf Smith knew 50% of the people who died there. They were his friends. It is important when you visit the Alamo that you go into the barricades. There's the long barracks. You can see pictures and maps, and there's large pictures too. There's a large picture of this painting is there. The battle at the Alamo is one of the things that led to, or the fact that his painting is at the Alamo is what has led to the myth that he fought in the Alamo. But looking at the history, he was not there. The painter actually painted that picture from memory. And another important fact, not a myth, but a fact, is that after the ammo ran out, Sam Houston left town. And one of the results of the Alamo was because of this. General Houston fled, and the Mexicans found the remainder of what was there at the Alamo. They came in and they noticed that there were 3 people approaching them. These 3 people who had approached were the last 3 survivors of the Alamo, of the battle at the Alamo. The first one was Susanna Dickerson and her baby. So the 3 of them approached, and the person who had came asked, what happened? And Susanna responded, everybody that was at the Alamo died. Can you imagine how Deaf Smith felt? He was shocked. So he brought those 3 survivors to Houston. Imagine 800 soldiers, and all that is left is 3 survivors. And Deaf Smith is who delivers these 3 remaining survivors. That is inspiring. Everybody was ready to get 800 people back. That is not what happened. Deaf Smith, the 5th myth about Deaf Smith was that he was murdered. And on his tombstone, it said, you need to look at where his tombstone is. Is it in Houston? Is it San Antonio? Is it up in the Panhandle? Is it in Richmond? Some people say yes, some people say no. He was buried in 1837. But he had a tombstone made of pine. It has disappeared over the years. And there is no clear indication of where he was buried. So by the 80s, that area, or in 1980s, somebody noticed that it looked like there was a caved in area in a cemetery. And nobody was sure, nobody knew that there had been a tombstone there. So people started to look, and when people searched for the tombstone, they found that this person there was a tombstone, that there was a grave that had sunken in. So Randall Sears, who was a friend who had passed away, a deaf friend who had passed away, said that there was
said, please bury me. Please bury me with this. So this is a small, cute coffin that was found. And this represents his hearing loss and his breathing problems, which were blamed on the breech birth, which caused his deafness. And that was a sign of bad luck at the time. I'm not sure if this myth is true or not, but 10 other Texas revolutionists were brought to that same church to be buried. And they made coffins, and in those coffins, they laid their rifles and their guns with them as they were buried. Again, we don't know if this is true or not. But the question, if we were to go to those graves, and I'm showing you a coffin, did they bury them feet first down into the soil, or did they bury them horizontally? That's a mystery that we will not be able to discover until we unearth those graves. And during Halloween time, I thought I would share two stories that are related to Deaf Smith. In 1842, at that time, General Houston was battling with Lamar. They were political enemies, and Houston wanted to bring and archive some documents because Houston was fearful that the Indians would overtake the army. And there was an old ghost story that Deaf Smith protested and went into the middle of a town square with his rifle, and people were shocked because they thought that he had died 5 years previously. Had he come back from the dead? So people were scared and the war ceased. And that's called the Archives War of 1842. I don't believe that myth, but it's a story that's out there. There's a story that I'm going to share with you now that I learned about 4 years ago about a professional artist who lived in Connecticut, near the Connecticut River. And that artist was asking a particular woman, as he was conducting some business, if she had heard of Deaf Smith. And she said, "Oh, yes, I know of him." And he said, "Well, how do you know of him?" He said, I know that Deaf Smith is from Texas, but his family is buried just right over here." And where that was in Haddam, Connecticut. Deaf Smith lives right there in that cemetery? And that belongs to that family cemetery? The artist asked, and she said yes. And Steve, to tell you the truth, I'm not crazy about the Halloween holiday every year, because the ghosts of the various slaves and Deaf Smith walk across their backyard because the graveyard is so close. And I had never dreamed that I would learn a new ghost story, but there you go. You know, it's very hard for me to summarize 5 months of military service into just a few minutes today with you. But Deaf Smith deserves to be called the eyes and the ears of the Texas Army. But I'm not leaving you yet. The good news is that you were going to receive a free pamphlet. The Deaf Texan is what I'm showing you right now on video. We have free information for you here online. We have a video, we have a play, we have articles, we have a recently developed history about Deaf Smith. During the end of this program, you and the viewing audience will be seeing links, and those links are available for you to copy. Once you click them, you can see pictures, videos, articles that you can download to research for your own information. Thank you to the Statewide Outreach Center, the SOC at the Texas School for the Deaf. They have preserved all of my research, my written articles, and my books at the Texas School for the Deaf Statewide Outreach Center. And if you come to Austin, you need to go to one very important library at the University of Texas at Austin called the Briscoe Center on American History, the Briscoe Center on American History. One last note, I just noticed that the Dallas Library posted that the siege around Bexar County, which was old San Antonio in 1835, people are wondering what's up with that particular battle. That was a battle before the Alamo, which is what we won until the Alamo. And the Alamo is when everything changed. The siege of Bexar, September to December 1835, is carved into this knife. And that's a way to preserve the victory that the Texians won in their efforts. Now, I am ready to answer any questions that you may have. I'm going to check in with my wife, and she will help me with the Q&A. I did already receive one question.
So somebody had asked why I have or why there was a skunk hat up here above my blanket. And my answer is that Deaf Smith loved to eat skunk. Back in the day, it was called a polecat. And so he would kill them and skin them, cook them up and eat them. He noticed that when he was eating polecat, his health improved. He had tuberculosis issues and all of the issues in his lungs disappeared. Did it help his hearing? No, it didn't, but it did certainly help him to be much stronger. And he just loved to eat. You know, that's one of the reasons why I have a small skunk hat up there, is to show that. Wait just a moment. I'm going to call on my wife real quickly. I'm in the kitchen and I'm yelling at her, Rosie, come on out, Rosie. Come on. She's bringing me the questions. Hold on just a second. So she's going to hand me the questions. My wife is writing them on a whiteboard for me. Ooh, this seems to be a long one. I think it's a full paragraph. It's funny. There was one person who had asked, and at the same time, somebody else was asking about eating the skunk. You know, I'm sure that if somebody eats them, or somebody asked, if you eat skunk, will you be able to tell by how they smell? And I'm not sure, but you know, back in the day, people ate a lot of different foods, such as, you know, people in Texas and all over the place ate skunk. It was pretty common. Skunk meat has some medical value to it, I guess. I mean, that is the question. You'd have to ask Deaf Smith. This next question. Ooh, I like this question. Thank you. Did Deaf Smith have an occupation outside of the military? Yes, he had several. He was a businessman. He sold horses. He failed at that profession. He then tried to sell cows and failed at that. Then he looked for silver mines with Bowie. They looked for silver mines. There was stories of silver mines everywhere, and they searched and searched, but they failed to find any. Let's hear. Did he grow food? No. His main job was as a hunter, and then he would sell the animals. So he would kill. A lot of his stuff was failed, but he did really good at the hunting. There was a next. He also bred horses and didn't do so well at that. Oh, another question. Somebody asked me, oh, this is a good question. I like that. You're curious how the nickname of Deaf Smith, instead of calling him by his Bible name, which was Erastus. Yeah, Erastumus, Erasmus. So why did they call him deaf instead of calling him by his Christian name? I believe in Texas, I don't know, in Connecticut or Mississippi, New York. I'm not exactly sure when they told him, but like you can be called by your Christian name in other states, but here in Texas, you tend to get a name that matches something about you. It's not an insult, it's more like a moniker. For example, there's one, you might talk about somebody who has 3 legs, and it's because they have broken a leg, and that means that they're using a crutch. Or you might want to call somebody One-Eyed Joe. So these kind of monikers are very common in Texas. And so the Christian name isn't used that much. So the hearing name of deaf is interesting. So in Texas, that shows a lot of respect for a person. It, instead of calling him deaf, like instead of calling him deaf, they called him deef, like beef, deef. So when they say that, when they say deef instead of deaf, that was a sign of respect. So it was almost like a hero's name, Deef Smith. You can read articles and there's a lot of presentations, and when you hear somebody say the words Deaf Smith, they should say it as Deef Smith. So he did not call himself Deef Smith. He called himself Erasmus. But also on the gravestone, it says Erasmus as well. So in Dallas, I'm trying to remember there, did he have a family? Yes. He married a Spanish woman who already had 3 children. She was a widow. And her name was Lupe. And she gave birth to 4 children, which meant altogether he had 3 stepchildren and 4 biological children. It's interesting because his brother and sister moved to East Texas. And they were there, his brother and sister moved to help support him and his family. Oh, that's an interesting question. Hold on just a moment. My wife is trying to write these down really quickly. Can you move that a little closer? Yeah. Oh, I do like this question. Hold on. I appreciate it. Comparing to today with the 1840s, where we have our border issues when you're talking about Mexicans at the border, I'm wondering what are your thoughts? I'm going to actually change this question a little bit. I'm wondering what the deaf world thinks about the problems and issues that are happening in South Texas, at the South Texas border, with people crossing. What would Deaf Smith say? What would his opinion be if he were to witness this? Deaf Smith valued the Tejano culture. He would welcome them. He was sure that, people who were born before 1835, hold on, my wife is writing another question also. Okay, so the word Tejana is important. So Deaf Smith appreciated and loved the Mexican culture. He supported them. And if you saw what was happening today, the problems, I think that he would welcome them. He believed in welcoming and being inclusive to everybody. And he believed in the Statue of Liberty and what it represents. Oh, okay. This is a good question. So when Deaf Smith was alive, so where did he live? He lived in an independent country, quote unquote. What I mean was that at the time, he moved to Texas from America. Texas was part of Spain and then under Mexico. At the time, Texas was a province under the realm of Mexico, this region. That's why the Texas Revolution happened. Texas won their independence during the Revolutionary War and became an independent country. They were independent from Mexico as well as from the United States. And so we were an independent country. But I'm sad to say that dream of an independent nation only lasted 9 years. And then Texas was no longer independent, was no longer an independent republic, and was adopted under the United States. They joined the Union 9 years after their independence. So I'm showing a picture of the Texas Republic, the Republic of Texas currency, the $5 bill. That bill plummeted to only 5 cents worth, which meant that the Republic of Texas could not afford to be an independent nation anymore. So back in that time, because of the failure of the monetary system, we had to go under yes. So Deaf Smith was buried in 1937. He died in November. He had tuberculosis, and they blamed all of his health issues, pneumonia, etc., on a breech birth. But what actually got him was tuberculosis. He was very sick. And from November until the time that he died, I guess that was the end of the question. So the last 5 months of his life, he was very, very ill from tuberculosis. And that looks to be the end of our questions. Oh, how funny. Somebody had asked a question. Somebody asked if I was a history professor, and I will tell you I have 3 degrees. I have 3 degrees in history. I have a bachelor's, I have a master's in history and deaf education, and my PhD, my PhD is in theatrical history, and I have passed the test to be an instructor, a history professor. But as for actually becoming a history professor, the answer is no. I focus on deaf history. I focus on deaf culture. I went to Southwest College, or I taught at Southwest College for the deaf in Big Spring, Texas. But I was a teacher, but I wasn't a full professor.
We had a question here about, did Deaf Smith meet General Santa Anna, the head of the army, during the siege of Texas? Yes, of course. If you will look at the picture that's painted in the state capitol in Austin, you will see Santa Anna in that painting, and they are looking at each other. But I tell you that General Santa Anna and his assistant named Chief Coss, C-O-S, was Santa Anna's brother-in-law. He vowed to kill Deaf Smith, and he offered 1,000 pesos at the time to capture Deaf Smith and have him hanged because of his reputation as being a Texian spy and scout. But guess what? Deaf Smith and another guy by the name of Rami caught Coss And Deaf Smith asked Houston for permission to slit his throat. And then Deaf Smith decided, no, it wasn't Christian to slit his throat, so he dropped the idea. So I think that's a great story. You can see a play that I wrote, including that scene, on the link that will be provided you. I think we have time for more questions. We're getting close to 3 o'clock. My good friend has been watching me, and she wants me to write a book about Deaf Smith. Well, that's not something that I can do. I have written this book already. That's a small book, if you will, and it's free, a mini book. But this is a book that's the best book, and this is really all you need. This is a book written by the author Claybor House, and he is the best authority. And this was written in 1973. I met this author and he inspired me to do all of this research. It's so interesting. I like this next question. Where was his wife buried? Nobody knows where Deaf Smith's wife was buried, which is sad. I take that back. His wife died in 1849, and his son-in-law was a freed Black slave, and all of those people died in 1849 from the cholera epidemic. And I know that they were buried in San Antonio, and which is very sad. Deaf Smith had often gone hunting, and he ventured out, and a lot of hard of hearing people like to be alone because it's hard to communicate. So he was fluent in Spanish. He was bilingual, but he wasn't buried with his wife. They told his wife and the freed Black slave families, and they fought from 1837 to 1845 to get Deaf Smith's pension, the rights to his property, his pension, his main monetary rights, to give the land that he owned in San Antonio, in Port Aransas, in different property that he had across the state. And the reason that this struggle lasted for so long, because he had never signed up for pension, but he did write prose, but he didn't do his homework. So his wife had to really labor to get his pension and to get the money she was owed after he died, which was unfortunate. Someone here wanted to know, here we have that $5 Republic of Texas bill that I'm showing you, why the money system and the bank that was used during the Republic of Texas failed. At that time, Texas had no money to base their monetary system on. Mexico was not helping them. The United States or the Union wasn't helping them. Nobody wanted to pay taxes. They thought that they could sell land and raise funds in that way, but all of their plans in the Republic failed. And there were lots of political fights like we have today with Democrats and Republicans. Lamar had a very different philosophy about the monetary system from Houston, and they did not plan well, and their plans flopped. And they basically had to crawl begging, asking to join the Union in 1845. because Mexico wanted to seize Texas, as did the Native Americans. So they got President Andrew Jackson to help pay off our debts, and then they agreed to join the Union. Remember that $5 bill was only worth 5 cents. And after they joined the Union, it gained its monetary value back to $5. It's impossible to have an independent country outside of the 50 states. I doubt that we could have sustained an independent republic without a monetary system that worked. I have a question here that's a funny question. Did Deaf Smith teach other deaf people? I have no idea. Who knows? Remember, he was a loner. He did not socialize with people. You know, a lot of deaf people he was like one of those people who could speak. He could use his lips, but could people understand him? Or could he understand other people? That is yet to be really understood. This is from a friend of mine from Dallas. He wrote a book about Deaf Smith. Grant Laird Jr. is his name. Welcome and thank you, Grant. I want to answer Alice's question. We do have a book about Deaf Smith that was designed for children. So when you look at the links that I provide, you'll see the name of that book that's designed for children. It's out of print, but you might be able to find it on eBay. So just check my links from the Statewide Outreach Center, and you will find information about children's books, including Deaf Smith. Okay. My teleprompter has disappeared. So thank goodness I have a plan B and my script is right in front of me. So I will pull this information from my script. The timing is great. I think we've pretty much concluded my presentation today. And I hope that you've learned more today and new things about Deaf Smith. There was no question about him being a true military hero during the Texas Revolution. I would like to thank the Dallas Public Library, Eric Johnson with the Dallas History Archives for inviting me to also speak about Deaf Smith and his military contributions during the Texas Revolutionary War. Thank you for spending your Friday afternoon and your time during this Halloween weekend with me. You all take care. Be safe out there. You stay sane. And remember this spider that's behind me. He says, yes, stay sane. Be well. I'm going to sign off now. Bye, folks.
Okay, at this time, I just want to reiterate that we will be sending out the recording for this presentation very soon, possibly within the next couple of days, and it will include this video recording as well as the link that I put in the chat to Dr. Baldwin's resources and materials. So be on the lookout for that. So anyone that registered will get the link as well. So I want to thank you again for coming out and joining us today. And we will be in touch with you soon with that link. So with that note, everyone have a good afternoon. And I will sign off. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.